Welcome to Relationscapes, the podcast where we journey through unfamiliar life landscapes and somehow end up feeling more at home. I'm journalist Blair Hodges in Salt Lake City, and our guide in this episode about queer Black history is author George M. Johnson.
Most of the history was written by the people who won. And so when the history is being written by the people who won, they're always going to show themselves in the highest light while reducing those who were oppressed who didn't get to tell the story. Some of these characters in the book I knew about as a kid. I just didn't know they were queer because patriarchy, homophobia, transphobia was still a dominant force. Even when we got the chance to tell our history, we still wouldn't tell the full history ourselves.
When George M. Johnson was a kid growing up in New Jersey, they loved Black History Month. They were thrilled to learn about the people who shaped American history for the better. But as they got older, they started noticing things were missing. Hidden stories that might have meant the most to a queer kid like they were. George was especially drawn to one of the most dazzling moments in Black history, the Harlem Renaissance. They went searching for what had been covered up, forgotten, or erased, and they resurrected those stories in their book Flamboyants, The Queer Harlem Renaissance I Wish I'd Known. It's a celebration of the Black queer writers, performers, and activists who made their way in 1920s America. George M. Johnson joins us right now to talk about Black and queer culture, how it impacted the past, how it enlivens our present, and how it can open up new possibilities for the future. George M. Johnson, welcome to Relationscapes. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
You included a poem in your book, Flamboyants. The poem's called Can You Answer Me This? And as we were prepping for the interview, I asked if we could start there because it's a poem about being interviewed. So please take it away.
Sure. Can you answer me this? Hands sweat with anticipation, mic and palm, calm, keep calm. It's just a poem, a song, an interview. Will you let them enter your view? What will the first question be? Will I say the truth? Will I tell a lie? With each question, will I live or die a little more inside? Will I hit the first note? Will I get stage fright and choke? Will I forget my lines? The nerves eating me alive. I breathe in deep, sip from the glass to my right. As the white host goes, welcome so-and-so to the show. I smile, laugh off the jitters, playing the part. Then it starts. Only time will tell how this goes. Parting lips, tongues untied. My name is so-and-so, and I.
Okay, thanks for that. I saw myself in this poem twice. The obvious part is the white host saying, welcome so-and-so to the show, but I also related to your worries about like hitting the right notes and stuff like that. I feel that pressure sometimes as a host. And so, it's comforting, I guess, remembering that guests might be feeling nervous too. And I think it's hard being interviewed.
Yes. I think everybody just assumes that it's like something that's natural to everybody because it's like, oh no, you're having a conversation. It's like, no, you are having a conversation, but you're having a conversation where you have to think about every word.
Yeah, I can relate. I've been on the other side of the microphone a few times. I'm sort of uncomfortable being interviewed. There's different pressures when I'm hosting. I'm also my own editor, so like I can fix stuff in post. But anyway, I related to the nervousness you describe.
Yeah, and it's always interesting because I don't realize how nervous some people are to interview me, which is what I've been told.
Right. Well, we're in it together now, George. And I'm going to take the spotlight off of us for a second and throw it over to actress and film producer Viola Davis, because a few years ago at the Oscars, when she received the award for Best Supporting Actress, she gave a powerful acceptance speech, and you quote from that speech at the beginning of your memoir. That memoir is called All Boys Aren't Blue. It's about gender identity and your experiences growing up as a queer Black person in New Jersey. So here's Viola Davis.
Thank you to the Academy. You know, there's one place that all the people with the greatest potential are gathered. One place. and that's the graveyard. People ask me all the time, what kind of stories do you want to tell, Viola? And I say, exhume those bodies. Exhume those stories. The stories of the people who dreamed big and never saw those dreams to fruition. People who fell in love and lost. I became an artist, and thank God I did, because we are the only profession that celebrates what it means to live a life.
Okay, so she talked about going to the graveyard, and in your memoir, you said that that's valid, her point's valid, but you also challenged it. You said that your memoir is proof positive that you don't need to go to the graveyard to find us. And now with your new book, Flamboyants, you've taken us to the graveyard after all. You're going back and finding people from the past. So talk about that decision for you.
Yeah, for me, it was like, I remember hearing that speech, and it was super emotional for me, super powerful for me to even hear it. But it did make me have to sit and think about, but what happens, to those who are still like here, who we do have the opportunity to correct that, and it's like, are we doing the job of correcting that, or are we continuing to wait until people are gone to give them their flowers, And so it's like a double-edged sword of where I had to come to a place where it's like I have to continue the storytelling that I'm doing while also not just telling the stories of the past, but doing restoration work of the people from the past whose stories have already been told, but been told incorrectly, or whose stories were told, but were told without the full tenacity of who they were as entire beings. And so it does get very interesting when it comes to like what story is the stories that we should be telling. But I also do this type of work because even if I never make, let's say, movies about these characters that I'm detailing in the book, what it does is it gives the space to tell stories of composite characters and tell stories of what it would be like in present day. What does the present day Renaissance look like? Where are we now, right? Which is why I also chose to not make the book Flamboyants 100% biographical. I chose to make the book a past to present story that connected it to the people who are living here today. So kind of like, it's almost like the tying of the two sayings. It's kind of like being able to bring exactly what she said home because it's super valid and super necessary, while also talking about the people of today who were affected by those people, but who are those people of today now? And how do we do that work to also make sure that we don't have another book that has to come out 100 years from now about me and about so many of the others when we could have did it in the real time while it was happening.
Yeah, like you talk about this, you'll have to help me with the pronunciation, but there's a Ghanaian principle, Sankofa or something like that?
Sankofa.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Ghanaian principle, which basically means we have to look to our past in order for us to move forward. Because our past does guide us and history does repeat itself. But the problem with the past is that most of the history was written by the people who won. And so when the history is being written by the people who won, they're always going to show themselves in the highest light while reducing those who are oppressed who didn't get to tell the story. And so that's why the looking back to the past has to come with also the restoration of past that was incorrectly told or erased, while also doing the work to put it back into the world, to compare it to today, to give us the roadmap and the blueprint of how those people survived the tyranny, how those people thrived in the tyranny, how those people fought the tyranny, right?
Yeah.
Because if not, it looks like a blip that happened in history rather than an actual constant fight that was happening and a constant struggle that was happening against the people who were the oppressors during those times.
Sure. And you talk about how as a child you really loved Black History Month because otherwise you felt like your heroes were hidden from you. A lot of history, even today in schools, focuses on white people white European, it's black people are a race. We've got this special month, and you'll even hear some white people say, well, we don't have a white history month. And the obvious response is you have 12 months of the year where white people are centered and highlighted. But you also say, as you've grown up, you've come to see some shortcomings in Black History Month as well. So for all your love for the month, you also see some shortcomings with it, especially with who tends to be highlighted. So take us through your thoughts on that, your growth on that.
Yeah, it was like these were characters. Some of these characters in the book I knew about as a kid. I just didn't know they were queer. Right. And so it was still being presented absent their full history because patriarchy, homophobia, transphobia was still a dominant force. Even when we got the chance to tell our history, we still wouldn't tell the full history ourselves. And so that's when, you become a writer. And you start to realize like that part of your job as a writer is to do that work even within your own community when you have the opportunity to highlight certain figures. And so why wasn't, Marsha P. Johnson ever talked about? Why was Miss Major never, really talked about during, Black History Month? And then, there are just so many others who have done so many things, but, we only talk about certain people through their accomplishments or achievements. If they're a first person to do this or if they invented something, right? We always talk about what was their contribution to American society in a sense, without really talking about who they were as individuals, like who were they as people, right?
Yeah.
It's like you knew, or I mean, we could talk about it, right? Like you know about Josephine Baker, you know about Martin Luther King, but it's like you don't really, when you're growing up and you have Black History Month, it's just so centered on the individual, right? Like I grew up knowing Martin Luther King, but we weren't taught who Coretta Scott King really was outside of his wife. But she was a huge she won her own Medal of Freedom, like not got one for him. Like she got her own Medal of Freedom for the work she did in this, as an activist. And so I think that's part of like what gets overshadowed at times is like you become like what we would say, like almost like the sidekick in the movie, right? The best friend in the movie. But what they forget to highlight is that you were actually an individual at times that may have done a whole lot of things too. But if the person you were attached to did so much more, it's easy to overlook the achievements of the people who were right there with you, along the way. And you like Bayard Rustin, right? Like it took a long time for people to start to acknowledge him now.
Yeah, like
during
this
Black
is
History Month.
Dr. King's right-hand guy who was queer.
And was the architect, right?
Yeah.
And then Elaine Locke, which I do talk about in Flamboyants, They always brought up W.E.B. Du Bois, but they rarely brought up Elaine. And Elaine was talked about in the same amount of great philosophy by Martin Luther King. He mentioned both of their names, but there was a reason only one was heralded, right? And so it's about doing like that type of work when it comes to the history.
It was especially hard for you because as early as 5 years old, you knew that you were kind of different than maybe what people thought you were supposed to be. You felt pressure about who you were. You had you talked about flamboyant mannerisms and you had different points of view on the way that boys could talk or dress or act. And you had questions about that and you're being pushed into a male gender role and it wasn't fitting you. And you're also not seeing representation in your heroes. You're not learning that you're not alone in this. You're feeling alone in this.
Yeah, honestly, and that's why I say like kids know, like I knew, I was like, I don't know what this difference is, but I just don't feel like the rest of y'all at times. And the things that I'm gravitating to, that I'm watching the people who do look like me, the boys who look like me gravitate to are not what I was gravitating to. I was not gravitating to football and I wasn't gravitating to certain things. And it wasn't that because I played baseball as a kid and I liked baseball, but when I stopped playing baseball, it was truly because it just was like, it was fun. I enjoyed it, but this is not for me. This is for my cousins. Like they want to be baseball stars. I don't. Like I want to be what I want to be. Even if I don't fully know what that is or if there's a place for me to be who it is that I want to be. But you feel it early on, and I felt it early on. And so it was tough growing up because I wasn't sure what my happy place was. Track and field, really did become my happy place. I actually did enjoy track and field, but even with track and field, like my favorite runners were Gail Devers and FloJo. So
Yeah.
I wasn't even gravitating towards Maurice Green or Michael Johnson. I really did like Michael Johnson, but it probably was because we just had the same initials, and I just thought that was cool. Like, oh, like
Yeah.
Michael Johnson, and then people call me Matthew Johnson. Like, that's kind of
Yeah.
cool. But the real people who I gravitated towards were still the women who ran track.
Yeah.
And so even then, I was still trying to find like a happy balance within.
There's this sentence in the book that really stuck out to me. You say, as a Black queer child, I had the right to know that Black queer people existed before me. Talk about that as a right. It's a really powerful statement there, the right to know.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Again, like when you just put it all together, it's like, well, who determines like who gets to know their history, right? Like how is that decision made? Because if you feel that every white kid gets to know their history, and then we, at least with Black History Month, feel that, you know, every Black kid gets to know their history. And, you know, now since then we've had a lot of like, you know, Hispanic Heritage Month and now Asian, you know, like where, you know, months are being given and like we're learning about different people's histories. But it was like, well, why don't I get to know about this particular group of people? Like, what's the determination on that? And is it truly, which I mean, we now can say that it is, but it's truly tied to the fact that you didn't even feel that me as a queer kid deserved the right to even be a queer kid.
Right.
And so because you as a queer kid, I don't think deserve to have rights or need to be converted into the hetero norm, then how could I ever think you would have the right to even know that people existed before you? Because I don't believe you should exist now. And I think that's really what that statement is trying to get at, which is your existence back then doesn't matter because your existence now doesn't matter. But as a kid, you don't know that. And so, but again, as a Black queer kid, it's like I can tie it easily to how people feel we shouldn't have to learn about slavery or we shouldn't have to learn about Black history. But then as the queer side, it's like, oh, but like there's even less of a right that people feel should be given to us to know about queer people before us.
Yeah, there's still a lot of people in the United States who believe that being queer or trans or basically not heteronormative standards is deviant, if not sinful or evil or threatening or dangerous or something that needs to be controlled or suppressed. And so I think highlighting stories of powerful or interesting or exemplary queer figures is threatening to people who reject queerness in general. Like I think there's a lot of fear there. People dismiss homophobia and transphobia as words because I think they've kind of just become, you know, maybe they're used too often. I don't know. But like, it is a fear. It seems to me there's a lot of fear there.
It's funny because I kind of go back and forth about what does fear mean? Like, what does fear actually mean? Primarily because what is the fear built in? And I think if I'm scared of monsters or if I'm scared of witches or I'm scared of, it's because it's built in how the representation of them show up in television or in film or in books or as bad guys, as evil, as this.
Yeah.
So when people say they fear gay people or they fear trans people, you have to actually get to what the root of that is. And so sometimes I feel that it's like the fear isn't that I'm going to harm you. Like that can't be the fear because there's no, like, what would the evidence be of that fear of what the harm would be, right? So then the harm actually becomes an imaginary, right? This is an imagined fear because this is a fear that has not happened. There is not something that was done to you because what you will oftentimes hear is a person say, oh, yeah, because trans people. Do you say, have you ever met one? Well, no. Okay. Okay. So what is the fear actually built in, right? It's like the fear is built in something that's actually like an imaginary fear, right?
Yeah.
And so I try to, I guess, parse that out a lot better because you have real fears in life, but then you have, like I said, imaginative fears, right? People have fears of heights for whatever. That's a real fear. Like when you like
get
there's
dizzy.
something like actually happens to you, right? But when you say you have fear of gay people, it's like, okay, so but if you're on the bus, you don't know who it so the fear is not actualized. It's imagined.
Nor
because
are queer people any greater of a threat than anybody else. But do you think the fear, to me, the fear could be rooted in personal insecurity?
It can be.
Gender roles and gender like expectations are so heavily policed, right? So you could go to India and see men walking down the street holding hands and not, they're just friends. They're you could see gay men doing that or straight men doing that, but here in the United States, we don't have that. Like, that stuff is beaten out of boys like early. Like, we don't hug our buddies, we don't hold our hands and stuff. So I think the fear is rooted kind of in self-policing and like, oh no, what does this mean for me? I think it could feel destabilizing for a person who's worked so hard to like fit gender roles to then feel like the script is changing and maybe feel betrayed by that or scared by that or,
Yeah, and I mean, it's all really tied to organized religion. And so, that's why they're fighting so hard to put like the 10 Commandments back in classrooms, because the biggest force that is starting to destabilize that notion and that ideology is that there has been a swath of people leaving the church, but leaving all churches, right? Like there's an exodus happening that's not just an exodus that's happening with Baptists or not just an exodus happening with Methodists or not just an exodus happening with Mormons. It is every single church. If there was a way to, I don't know how they would ever estimate, oh, this is this many Baptists in the country, this is this many. Well, I guess you could use a census, but I bet that number over the years is seismically shifting to more people who would identify as spiritual than religious, and more people who would say they have no religious affiliation of going to church anymore. And so that used to be the fear. The fear-mongering thing was, if you do this, God will do this to you. If you do this, God will do this to you. And then that fear has eroded over the years, because the more man does to you, the less you can even have the fear of, again, the imagined, right? Which is the thing that you can't see, right? Because now the fear or the attack is coming from conservatives or certain people, in my case, right? Or even within my own community, right? So when the fear becomes more man-based, it's much harder to then use this fear of something that you can't actually see versus the actual day-to-day people I have to live with. And so I actually think that's the biggest fear, is that the loss of the use of the fear of the God, because man has done so much destruction to that. And it's funny because they're the men who have destroyed, right? Because they now praise a false idol. And it's funny because it's like they're not even realizing what they're doing. And it's like, well, no, there's going to be no way for you to swing this back to a religious base, no matter how many Bibles you put in school, no matter you went so far that there's no way to ever swing that pendulum back.
I definitely see that. We're talking with George M. Johnson about the book Flamboyants, the queer Harlem Renaissance I Wish I'd Known. And George, you decided to zoom in on the Harlem Renaissance because you call it one of the queerest historical periods, when Black folks in New York took really big risks in the arts and literature and music, and there was a lot of creativity and imagination. Tell us a bit about why you chose the Harlem Renaissance to focus on in this book.
Yeah, and I probably need to have them go back and add the word one of the queerest recorded periods.
Okay, yeah, fair.
Because that's actually what it is, right? It's not that it was the queerest period. It's just that's one of the ones that we actually got to write down, which is why I say like it's super important about who writes history. This was a period where a lot of the Black folks were able to write our own history.
Yeah.
Because if we didn't, then we wouldn't know about this period, because white people didn't write the Harlem Renaissance. Like we did the arts, the culture, the writing, the essays, the traveling, all of that was done by us. And so that's how you get it to being like, oh, one of the queerest periods. And it's like, well, unfortunately, we don't know. Maybe in 1875, it could have been a huge queer period that never was able to be written down, right?
Yeah.
And so I chose that period because that's the best starting point for me to then do some more of the groundwork to go back to wherever we can go back to. And it's hard. We oftentimes, it's like we know that queer people existed during, slavery.
Yeah.
Like we know that because we didn't just pop up in the, at the Harlem Renaissance, but it's like, it's what gets recorded that we know. And so you then have to sometimes go into the imaginative and kind of connect dots and do like a lot of groundwork to even figure out like, well, who was the queer period before then, right? What was the queer period during these other revolutions and these other things? And I always say, I mean, we just know like Greeks were very queer, Romans were very queer, but I'm also like Europeans were very queer, right? Like you don't make laws against something that doesn't exist. And they were making laws against sodomy and laws against this and laws against, so it's like they're making laws against something that clearly exists. So, and then, you know, they rob, they pillage, they create America, but they're the same people who were making the laws in Europe about this same thing coming over here to do the exact same thing. So we know it existed. It's just about how do we do that work to even figure out what that existence looked like for them.
Yeah, and you talk about how the story that a lot of people hear about Black history kind of starts with slavery in the United States and then goes to the civil rights movement and then maybe up to the present. And as you point out, that skips so much Black history and queer history between that. Like the Harlem Renaissance was between slavery and the civil rights movement. We just like skip right past it.
Oftentimes, every now and then, and growing up, like they would talk about it, but it was not a huge thing. It was just like, oh, this was this one period, you know, where a lot of creativity and a lot of things, you know, changed culturally and shifted and moved and jazz was born. Music, and you know, they kind of talk about it from that type of standpoint, but realistically, they do skip huge swaths of what Black life was like in America between those periods, right? And it's like we don't often talk about, well, what happened, you know, like you said, between 1935 and 1950. Like what else was happening then, right? And that's when I started to, you know, be able to do my own research, like how the Workmen's Progress Association, when they did the recordings of the last enslaved people that were still alive, right? And they did this whole project to record it, right? And that's the only recordings we have. Federal government sent people around to actually record them, right? So it's like, but that was in like the 40s, right? So it's like, but I didn't learn about that in school. I had to learn about that doing my own research on a different project I was working on. And so it's like the things like that just were like, whoa, right. It just seems like we just skipped like a lot of things, and not we, but like, you know, it was a choice made, because an active choice made to skip a lot of those things and to be able to say like, oh yeah, because Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, and then they don't try to make the connection of the dots, especially with kids in this country. Like, well, why was a civil rights movement needed if they were free, right? They don't explain that part, and they make it sound like a South thing. Well, this is a Southern issue, and you know, we were trying to, and it's like, well, no, it also was a Northern issue and a Western, like this was an issue for the entire country, right? It wasn't just the South, and it's always been painted that way, the North versus the South, and it was like, well, no, slaves were everywhere, like. They were in the North too. They just don't get talked about, because then it would make the North look like hypocrites, right? Like, and then it changes the narrative of like, oh no, like the people in the North, they rejected slavery. It's like, well, no, they didn't. Like, you know what I mean? And so that's part of the work that I do, is to kind of try to connect those dots and weave it all in so that people understand, like, which is why I talk about McCarthyism and Flamboyants, because it was like, oh, we didn't know them. There was an actual like law, like a huge push to really eliminate queer people in the country. I mean, yes, it's just not, everybody just says Stonewall, but it's like this whole period before Stonewall is what led up to Stonewall, right? Like it wasn't just that that this particular group in New York City in this bar were tired that night. No, this was a whole active thing, and it affected people from the Harlem Renaissance with their queerness, who had to go back into hiding, who moved to the West. Like, and that's why I talked about it in the book that way, so that people could really connect those dots.
Yeah, and you say that it was one of the queerest periods in Black history as far as the records go, but you also point out that doesn't mean that queerness was accepted. And another statement here is that Blackness itself is inherently queer. And I wanted you to kind of unpack that as well, because within Black communities, sometimes there's homophobia to reckon with and transphobia to reckon with as well.
Absolutely. When I say Blackness is inherently queer, Mike, it comes from several different standpoints. Black people are looked at as the oddity. You know, I feel the world runs on like anti-Blackness. and I always remind people, I'm like, Black people are the only people that no matter where we go in the world, if a person feels offended by you, they're going to call you the N-word.
Mm-hmm.
That is the one slur that every single person in the world knows that you can call a Black person. Whether those Black people experience that N-word, because that was a word, realistically used throughout the United States in chattel slavery, right? So it's like, that's how you know that we are seen as an oddity in the world. And, you always see these videos of like when Black people go overseas, like tourists will take pictures of them. Like, just, I'm actually here too on vacation. And like, you see these things happen and everybody's like, why does this happen? Why? It's like, because we are actually seen as queer to the world, not based on sexuality or identity, but based on our skin. Like,
it's not normative.
Queer to people.
You're not
it's
seen
not
as,
normative to some people. You're not seen as that. You are seen as an oddity. You are seen as a queer thing. And so I always say to be Black, like, it's inherently queer from that standpoint. But I also have to say, if I believe that, let's say Black people were the first people in this world, that queer people existed within that. Like, it didn't come from some other culture and then was adopted by us.
Yeah.
Like, it was us that showcased it to others. Like, we had it within our culture from the beginning as well.
And how does it manifest within that culture, right? Like, what does it mean to be gay in a particular culture? It's not the same across the board. So your book highlights that so well. And again, it's called Flamboyants, the Queer Harlem Renaissance I Wish I'd Known. You chose Langston Hughes as the first person to profile in the book. So throughout the book, we get to meet these individuals. You kind of give us a little bio of that person. And there's this beautiful art, this original, beautiful new art that accompanies each piece. So with Langston Hughes, he was the famous writer who wrote a poem called Let America Be America Again. And this was in 1936. And I think a lot of people may have heard this poem. I remember reading it back in high school. It was assigned to us. But I thought it would be great to hear you actually read Langston Hughes's poem for us, and then we can talk about it a little bit.
Sure. Let America Be America Again by Langston Hughes. Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain, seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great strong land of love, where never kings convine nor tyrants scheme, that any man be crushed by one above. It never was America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free. Say, who are you that mumbles in the dark? And who are you that draws your veil across the stars? I am the poor white, fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush the weak. I am the young man full of strength and hope, tangled in an ancient endless chain of profit, power, gain, of grab the land, of grab the gold, of grab the ways of satisfying need, of work the men, of take the pay, of owning everything for one's own greed. I am the farmer, bondsman to the soil. I am the worker, sold the machine. I am the Negro, servant to you all. I am the people, humble, hungry, mean. Hungry yet today despite the dream. Beaten yet today, oh pioneers. I am the man who never got ahead, the poorest worker bartered through the years. Yet, I'm the one who dreamed our basic dream. I'm the old world while still a serf of kings, who dreamed a dream so strong, so brave, so true, that even yet its mighty daring sings. And every brick and stone and every furrow turned, that's made America the land it has become. Oh, I'm the man who sailed those early seas in search of what I meant to be my home. For I'm the one who left dark Ireland's shore and Poland's plain and England's grassy lea, and torn from Black Africa's strand I came to build a homeland of the free. The free? Who said the free? Not me. Surely not me. The millions on relief today, the millions shot down when we strike, the millions who have nothing for our pay. For all the dreams we've dreamed, for all the songs we've sung, and all the hopes we've held, and all the flags we've hung, the millions who have nothing for our pay, except the dream that's almost dead today. Oh, let America be great again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be the land where every man is free. The land that's mine, the poor man's, Indians, Negroes, me. Who made America? Whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain, must bring back our mighty dream again. Sure, call me any ugly name you choose. The steel of freedom does not stain. From those who live like leeches on the people's lives, we must take back our land again. America. Oh yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me. And yet, I swear this oath, America will be. Out of the rack and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft and stealth and lies, we, the people, must redeem the land, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and the endless plain. All the stretch of these green great states, and make America again.
You say, as you've read the work of Langston Hughes, that his work felt both poignant and secretive to you. Talk about that, the secretive element of it, especially.
Yeah, Langston was able to write in a way where he was able to do a lot of coded language, especially around queerness. There's the essay that I talk about within Flamboyants, Spectacles and Color, which I feel is one of the earliest describings of ballroom and ballroom community, which, you know, we've seen today on like shows like Pose or movies, documentaries like Paris is Burning. But that essay, you know, it really chronicles this event, this spectacle that he is watching, that he is calling so colorful. But he's, you know, viewing it as a celebration where the community is coming together to celebrate the queerness and celebrate the colors that make up our community. And that's, you know, part of the beauty within his writing. I think that, of course, like, you know, when you read America, the poem I just read, it is, or Let America Be America Again, excuse me. It's very plain, like it's very in your face. It's very, you know, kind of punch you in the mouth. But there's also certain things in there where, you know, he's using language that some people may not pick up on as quickly. Some people may not understand exactly what he's talking about and how he is addressing, you know, the indigenous who were also here, and how he is also, you know, describing how the immigrant of white is different than the immigrant who is non-white. And the juxtaposition of, you know, when he's talking about Poland, he's talking about certain other countries, right? And so a lot of people may not get it, and they may just look at it as like, oh, he wants this to be, this land is your land, this land is my land, and we all live together. And it's like, no, there's a great juxtaposition that is happening with who gets to be the poor white, who gets to be the poor Negro, who gets to be like, and so there's a lot of ways in which he writes where he's having, like, if you just read it surface level, it's like, oh yeah, I understand what this means. But if you go into it, like really into the words of it, you realize that this story that he is weaving is much bigger than America. And that's, you know, really what he's getting at this. This is a much bigger problem than just the dream that you have sold that this country was supposed to be. Because it never was. It never manifested. And did you really want that? Is that actually what you meant when you said that?
See, and that's a hard thing to do in a country that loves to celebrate the 4th of July and think the country's great and talk about our freedoms and that we're all, oh, it's this great melting pot. But Langston Hughes is speaking up about, he's criticizing the country, right? And that's going to get blowback. That's going to have people pushing back against that. And you talk about how people that speak up about the truth in the face of criticism is what leads to books being banned. You say truth telling has never been safe for us, but it's always been necessary.
Yeah, that's the only, I mean, it's at the end of the day, all you got is the truth. Like, you got to have your truth. But it's never been something safe for us to tell. And when I think about the book banning, I think about the slave journals where a lot of them had to write using pseudonyms, and a lot of them had to change the names of the plantations they were on and change the names of certain things because there was a fear. And it actually did happen with several of the slave narratives where the enslavers were able to figure out the coded language because they were talking about certain things and landmarks and figure out what slave actually was the one who wrote it. And so, you know, it's just never been a safe thing for us to tell the truth about a situation, right? Because how could my memoir, which is just a truth about my life, I'm just telling my life story, how could that create such a conviction in you to want to ban it? Like, because it's like, well, I don't feel it's appropriate for who? It's my true story. If this thing happened to me at 10 years old, I have every right to say it in a book. And if a teenager is reading it, well, a teen may be going through it because it happened to me at 10. So it then, you know, it really just becomes a safety issue for when you decide that you're going to write texts that go against the ideology that, you know, America is this great place, you know, and even with what we're dealing with right now, it's like, make America great again. And it's like, well, what time period are you referring to? Because you're not referring to a policy period, right? And we know you're not referring to a policy period because the person who started it doesn't understand policy. So you're right.
Well,
you know,
George,
it
he has
doesn't even understand the
concepts of
basic
policy.
functions of government.
He has concepts of a plan.
But again, yeah. And so it's like, this isn't even like, it goes far beyond just like the ideology, the worshiping of the false idol and all this. Like, this is not about policy anymore. It never was about policy. So let me not say it's not about policy. For us who know, we knew this was never about policy. This was about taking this to a time period of where one group of people had the most rights in this country, and it was white men. And that is what we are watching. So this is an attempt to reduce the rights of every single person, unless you are a white man, while also keeping in place, as Langston Hughes said, that this system can only work, though, if there are also poor white men who believe that I have more rights, so eventually I will never be a poor white man. And it's like, no, because you have no power, and the people in power will say, yeah, you have all the rights, so you can do this too. But that's the con. You can't. You can't, because the design is that you cannot. And so that's really what it gets, that's really what it gets down to.
And there's additional tragedy here too, because as you point out, Langston Hughes never lived openly or fully as a queer person publicly. And there's other figures that lived the same way. Count Cullen is another Black writer. He was born in 1903. He would go on to become a teacher for one of America's greatest essayists in James Baldwin. And his work was part of this negritude movement. And he was in the closet, though. Like, he married W.E.B. Du Bois's daughter. So tell us a little bit about Count and what he was facing in terms of having to hide his queerness while also trying to speak truth to America's racism. Yeah,
he's one of my favorite people that I profile because he just got caught in a really tough situation. Du Bois's whole idea of the talented 10th movement, and
that's like the best Black people will lift the rest of the race up, white people will find them acceptable, and then we can lift everybody.
And so he saw Count as this is the perfect type of person who should, because this is like the rock star now in the literary world, and this is exactly who should be marrying my daughter. And I wouldn't even say that Count was closeted as much as I would say discreet. Like, I think there's two different things because it wasn't that like clearly Langston Hughes knew, and they knew, they knew, it wasn't like they didn't know, and he may not have been go public about it. But I think it was known, right? Like I think like it was like two things can be true. Like I'm not public about it, but it also is known. And I think that's actually what was happening. But it put many of them at this interesting juxtaposition because the creativity was queer, right? Like it was coming from the lens of queer people because they viewed the world in a different way. But you wanted to have the greatness of the person absent the lens that made them the great person that they were. And that's a hard fight, you know, and it's hard to live at that. I don't know what you would say, but it's hard to live that intersection. Thank you for the word finally coming. It's hard to live at that intersection. And there are many times where before I fully accepted myself, I wouldn't wear heels or I wouldn't wear certain clothes or certain outfits because even though people knew I was queer, I was afraid of what quote unquote being too queer would mean for certain folks and was denying my own happiness because it was like, well, if I'm this particular type of gay, it gives you a crossover audience than if you're this particular type of gay versus being this particular type of queer versus exhibiting this, you know, type of queerness. And so all of that is a very hard juxtaposition for any of us who are just trying to survive, right?
Yeah,
like trying to make a living and survive.
Yeah, this is respectability politics, right? It's the difference between maybe some gay people, for example, who would think, okay, we got to fit in. We got to wear the suit and tie and cut our hair in this way, and we got to speak in a certain way and carry our bodies in a certain way, versus other people that are like, no, I'm going to wear the high heels, all right? My voice is going to sound different. I'm going to walk different. And then there's fights between marginalized people. They're saying, hey, you're selling out and you're making it harder for the rest of the queer people. And then others saying, hey, you are being weird and we don't like what you're doing because it's going to make all the normal people, quote unquote, not like any gay people. So there's sort of this infighting that happens with respectability politics.
Yeah. And that's why I've always publicly said you could be LGBT and also like you could be LGBT and not queer. Because there's a difference. There's a difference. Like there's a difference. If just being LGBT, but accepting the notions of all the roles and everything else that heterosexual people do, well, that doesn't advance you. That doesn't even keep you safe. And I get it, right? Like, I get why people do it because they feel like they feel like, I'm not going to say I do, but I think a lot of people feel like it's a reduction of harm. It's a harm reduction tool. It's a safety thing. And I respect it, but also have to understand if you can't live in the totality of your experience, then what kind of living is that?
Yeah, that's the lesson that you take from Count Cullen, is you say like his brilliance and talent couldn't protect him from a society that was unwilling to accept his full self. So you told him like you wish he would have just accepted his full self instead of waiting for that or hiding from that.
It was kind of sad. Like to me, it was one of the sadder stories because he it's just hard, and I understand that story because I've seen it happen with so many people in my community before too, and so it just was like tough to see like that he went through so much with that he just left the movement, like he just left and decided, but that's what I always said, how the universe will do it is, he ends up becoming James Baldwin's mentor and English teacher, and then James Baldwin takes the baton, right? And so it's about like the baton was passed. And so that's the greatest thing that he did was he passed the baton in a way where he was like, look, I couldn't be my fullest probably, and I couldn't be, but you got a chance to take it to the next, and then just make sure that, whatever place you can get to, that you pass it to the next one to make sure that it gets passed to, right? It's like without Countee, there's no James. Without James's Notes of a Native Son, there's no All Boys Aren't Blue. So the baton has been getting passed, and I hope that somebody after me takes my baton and says, I'm going to take it even a step further than George was able to do with All Boys Aren't Blue. And Flamboyants and whatever I'm writing, like I'm going to take this even further than George was able to try and move the needle.
And your book is so good at this because it doesn't demonize or lionize any of these figures. You explore their complexities and say, well, here are some drawbacks or some limitations or some tragedies, and here's some strengths and some triumphs. Like you really are wrestling with the complexity of these folks, and you're not making them into statuesque heroes or villains or just pitiable people that we can just cry and say, oh, what a horrible life. Like, the complexities there. That's the strength of the stories that you're shaping here, George.
Yeah, and I think that's what what the book boiled down to me, or what I hope my work boils down to, is like the totality of storytelling. Like, I am a villain in somebody's story, and it is my job to talk about me being the bad guy, me being the villain. Even in All Boys Aren't Blue, I talk about the moments I messed up on things I probably shouldn't have said and ways I shouldn't have acted. But that's good writing when you could be that introspective to talk about when you were the villain in someone else's story, because it helps other people to be more reflective, which is why I love anything that's written about a villain's origin story. I love reading villain origin stories because it's usually sparked out of a place of someone harming them.
Yeah, humanizes them.
So it humanizes them in a way where you get a full understanding of like how, and that's why I also love talking about the anti-hero, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not a hero or villain, but sometimes there are anti-heroes too, right? Like, that exist that are just super complex characters for super complex reasons or a myriad of reasons. And so that's why it was my duty to write about them in their totality without, ever villainizing, demonizing them for the missteps that they made, because I make them too.
Yeah, I think Josephine Baker, another person that you write about in the book, is really exemplary of what we're talking about. This is a woman who was born into poverty, and she became a famous singer and entertainer. She's celebrated today by people like Beyonce as being inspirational. But you don't shy away from the hard stuff in her story. She was bisexual, but she was also pretty homophobic, and so there, I see you wrestling with her. Tell me a little bit about that, because this one seemed a little personal for you, seeing her. Maybe you have a beef with her a little bit, or tell me about this.
I think it was like, I don't have a beef with her, but I was just more shocked. Because I had never known that story.
Okay.
And it's not one that's widely known. It's not widely talked about, but she essentially adopted a lot of children that she called the Rainbow
Tribe.
Yeah. Which already on the surface was like, okay. And then so there were a couple things she did. She would allow people to basically pay to see the kids all interact together.
Yeah, all these kids from like different countries or different ethnicities.
Countries, because every kid was from a different country, different ethnicity, different background. And she was doing it under a philosophy of, the word is slipping me, but basically showing like how the whole world can be all in the same room at the same time and love each other as siblings and acceptance and all of these different things. But one of her adopted kids was queer, and she basically kicked him out of the chateau. Yeah. Because she had a huge, mansion there where all the kids were, and she kicked him out and made him live with his father because she found out that he was queer, and she was just very unapologetically unaccepting of it. Like, she really wouldn't. And in doing the research, and again, this was something that I just didn't know, that a lot of people didn't know, which in reading the book, a lot of people are like, we had no idea. But because I put the son's name in the book because during COVID, they had a celebration of Josephine Baker's life, and the son is still alive. And so there is a YouTube video. I found an article, but I believe there is a YouTube video that's still up of him speaking at this event, honoring his mother, but forgiving his mother. And so he forgives her, because he just said he's lived enough life to understand the constraints of how far her love could have. Yeah,
she was bisexual too.
When she was dealing with, she's dealing with her own identity thing, and him being like the mirror holding it up almost in a sense, and so it just was her story was just so complicated, but so jarring at the same time, because she just was taught in such a way that she was so beloved, but she also is one of the few characters from the Renaissance where her sexuality is discussed, like, has been discussed. Like, her sexuality has not been hidden, like, for a long time. Like, people knew that Josephine Baker, was bisexual for a long time. So it just became even more interesting to see that part of her own struggles with the loving of it. But it's something that we witness in communities today. Like, there are definitely people who love me, like, and adore me, but the moment it shows up in their household, it becomes a totally different issue for them. And I've witnessed it and I've seen it. happen in very, very real time with certain, we'll say former family friends. But
like a not my child kind of a thing where they kind of got along.
A very not my
Wow,
child
wow.
kind of thing where my grandmother had to step in. Like, you know what I mean? Like seriously.
Wow.
And so it's hard when you witness it. Again, it was hard for me to read about it because there is a particular story that I've never written about, but I will be writing about it, of my grandmother going to the wedding of one of my friends was a trans man, and standing in place of their parents who wouldn't go. But this was but the parents were people who we grew up in the church where we have all known each other for over 30-something years. And they were very supportive of me very early on in my career, knowing I was queer. So it was a very, very, very hard thing to witness happen in the ways in which it has. And it's still, with that particular former family friend, it's still beef.
Yeah.
'Cause we just recently talked about it. So.
Well, it feels like there's at least, I mean, these stories are tragic, but there's at least some kind of solidarity and maybe commiseration in seeing that you aren't alone in experiencing that, and being able to see it happen in other families can at least give you points of connection and like fellow feeling with people who are going through it. If that, I mean, that's a silver lining to a terrible situation, but at least you got that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I just continue to try and live my life and be an example of what family should look like and could look like. A lot of people look at my family as a possibility model, and my family is okay with that. There are times where my mother and my aunts, they went very viral when they went to a school board meeting, a huge school board meeting, and defended my book. And I posted the video.
I have the audio right here. Do you mind if I play that?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, here it is. She's reading from a statement that you wrote because you couldn't be present at that time. You were on the road. And the video picks up as she's reading that statement.
My book is not for kids. It is for young adults aged 14 through 18, grades 10 through 12. Lie number 2, my book is not pornography. If anytime sex is discussed, we consider it pornography. The only show that will be on TV is probably Sesame Street. My book details my first sexual experiences. Teens need to know about agency, consent, and that they have a right to say no and wait until they are ready. People wonder why the rate of sexual assault and abuse is so high in college and beyond. Look no further than the fact that you removed all texts teaching young adults about it. And before you tell another lie, I talked with teens all year. They are not being taught about it at home either. The final lie is that my book is introducing hard topics to teenagers and exposing them too soon. Any parent trying to ban our books has likely never talked to their teen about what actually goes on in their daily lives. I was a 13-year-old nearly 25 years ago. Do you all remember what the hottest topic was that year? It involved a president and a woman named Monica Lewinsky. Every child, preteen, teenager, and adult in the country was introduced to sex that moment. That's the hard truth. Our books are not introducing teens to hard topics. They are simply the resource needed so that they can understand the hard topics that they are living out day to day. Finally, as a Black queer person, I know what it's like to read books that don't tell my story. So in this hunt to protect teens, does it ever cross your mind that removing or restricting this life-saving story for LGBTQ students only harms them more? Or how removing this life-saving story for Black teens harms them? Or do you not care because that's really what this fight is over? Removing LGBTQ stories and Black stories. If you don't want your child to read it, that's fine. You have every right to not allow your child to read it. But you don't get to trample on the rights of parents like my mother and my aunts who have raised LGBT.
That's amazing. And the school board there in New Jersey, from what I understand, voted to keep the book on the shelves at the time. What was the public reaction to it? You posted the video and it went viral.
Yeah, the thing that got everybody the most was all of the quote tweets and the comments. There were a lot of LGBT people who were adults, who were my age, who were saying, I've never seen like people this fiercely devoted to a queer child, or like, oh my God, like it's so beautiful to see parents of queer kids go this hard, especially from Black community. And it just was such a beauty. People were like, damn, this is what parenting is. Like, your mother's fighting for her child's life story. like, you know, and defending it and not backing down from it.
Yeah, we need more people who refuse to back down. That's George M. Johnson, author of the book Flamboyants, The Queer Harlem Renaissance I Wish I'd Known. George is an award-winning Black queer non-binary author and activist. They've written about race, gender, sexuality, and culture in places like Essence, The Advocate, Teen Vogue, and like 40 other national publications. And there are too many awards and accolades to list right now, but I'll say their debut memoir, All Boys Aren't Blue, is a New York Times bestseller, and Flamboyants has been named a New York Public Library Best Book of the Year, a School Library Journal Best Book of the Year. It was selected for the Rainbow Book List, and it received rave reviews, including one from me, because I think the book's outstanding, George.
Thank you.
You say in the book that you feel like we're kind of in a new renaissance right now, that Black people are continuing to shift culture and being credited more for that shift in ways that they haven't before, and maybe even in ways that they weren't credited for in the Harlem Renaissance. So maybe take a second to talk about today's Black Renaissance.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're just so expansive now. And I mean, you know, whether you look at shows like Pose, you look at what, you know, the Beyonce Project Renaissance and how it shared, you know, the culture of the origins of house music and how it, you know, let people learn who Larry Levin was, who was, you know, the architect of house back in the late 70s, early 80s, with his best friend, Frankie Knuckles, who, you know, went to Chicago and, you know, really created Chicago House. And you had Larry do this. And so I'm watching today, though, like, you know, the Little Nas X's of the world, right? Like having a gay, you know, Black pop star, like that's cool. Like that's, you know, that's had a #1 hit and, you know, kids actually being able to like to see it, you know, like that to me is just really, really cool.
And there's still some hate, but it wouldn't have been possible before in this way. Right?
Yeah, you know, but you know, as a kid who loves, I love 70s, 80s music, you know, I feel like that's Sylvester, you know, but it's like, you know, Sylvester should have been as big as Lil Nas. You know, should have been, like Sylvester was big, but Sylvester should have had #1 hits and should have been singing at the biggest stadiums and the biggest arenas with that voice. And, you know, it's beautiful to see, you know, people like Jeremy Pope, you know, in the acting space to be a Black gay actor, but just nominated and for Tony Awards and Emmy Awards and all the things. And then you had Billy Porter on Pose, you had MJ Rodriguez on Pose. Like you have it in every space. And then you look at publishing and like Leah Johnson is, you know, winning, and Aiden Thomas and myself, like we're all, you know, these queer people who are really moving up in publishing as queer people. So it's like every aspect, and in fashion, we don't even have to talk about it, but like Laquan Smith and, you know, like it's just every facet that you can like think of. You are seeing this movement touch all of the touch points. And the beautiful thing about it is you see us together. Like there are pictures of us together. And so it's not like we have to live these siloed lives. You get to actually see all of the different beautiful spaces within our coalition of LGBTQ people also be in the same rooms together, also work together, also collaborate together, and also be able to bridge that gap and not just have to be in the queer space only. Like we have crossed over into it, and it's really nice to be doing it with like people to your side, you know, not trying to chase the people in front of you, not trying to leave people behind, but like what all of us are like, no, we are all creating things that we all can see each other in and that we all can touch each other, grab each other, and grow together with. And I think that's the beautiful part. And it reminds me of the Negritude movement. It reminds me of Elaine putting the New Negro together. It's about all of us as a collective from all of our spaces working together to move the culture forward. And I feel like we are there.
And it's not just about struggle and difficulty and hardship and oppression, but it's also about creativity and joy and like beauty and fun and like,
yeah, I think it's about all of it. I think it's about all of it. And I always say, I'm like, you know, even when we just have collective moments of Blackness, like when Beyonce's Homecoming came on TV, and it was a rough time, right? I believe it was during COVID, possibly when they first filmed or aired it, but it was like we were stuck in the house, and like, but we had like this collective moment of like having a good time together through the internet, you know? So it's like, even when we're having the harshest of times, the hardest of times, we still find joy. And that's my whole thing is like, you got to find the joy.
Yeah, it came out like right before COVID, and then it just like took off because
Yeah,
we were all like,
yeah.
yeah.
So you got to find the joy.
That's George M. Johnson, author of Flamboyants, The Queer Harlem Renaissance I Wish I'd Known. Before we go, George, can you speak to regrets, challenges, and surprises? We always end episodes by asking authors what they would change about the book now that it's out, or what the hardest thing about writing it was, or something that surprised them as they were working on the project. You can pick one of those to speak to.
Yeah, I think what I'll talk about is what Zorna Hurston talks about. And I think I mentioned it a little bit at the end. But basically, as a writer, you wish you had all the information. You wish you knew everything. You wish you knew all of the words. You wish you knew all of the facts. You wish you had every single thing in your mind because you write the book and then, you know, when you're done with it, it comes out in the world. Someone says, oh, well, this is this or this is that. You wish you could go back and fix it. But as a writer, what you have to learn is, and what you have to know is, if I knew all of these things, would I have ever written the book? Because part of writing is that I don't know all of the things. And part of the writing is the discovery process of the writing. And so I think that's why I don't have regrets with what I've ever written, because it challenges me to do something more, to write something next. But also what I've learned is if I changed anything in my life from the past, it alters my future. And so there may not be an All Boys Aren't Blue if I did something different in the past. If I did just one thing different, if I went to this college instead of that college, if I made this decision to pledge versus not pledging, there may never have been an All Boys Aren't Blue. So I don't regret any single thing because it changes and alters everything that I have to do moving forward.
Oh, speaking of regrets, I would have regretted it if we failed to mention the artwork in Flamboyants. There are original pieces created for each person covered in the book, and the artist is...
Yes, Charlie Palmer.
Yes, the visuals in the book are so beautiful from artist Charlie Johnson.
A dear friend and brother now. Like, Charlie is amazing. So, yeah.
Yeah, check out Flamboyants, The Queer Harlem Renaissance I Wish I'd Known. And George also just published a novel co-written with Leah Johnson called There's Always Next Year. It's a young adult holiday romance novel that it just came out in December 2025. So folks can check that out as well, maybe when the holidays roll around again. George, thanks so much for joining us on Relationscapes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Relationscapes. And if this is your first time joining me, welcome to the journey. It's great to have you along. If this episode resonated with you, I'm going to recommend a few fellow traveler episodes that I think work really well for Black History Month and for any month, really. Try Black and Beyond the Binary with K.B. Brookins, or how about Celebrating Black Womanhood with Catherine Joy White? Both really incredible guests who wrote amazing books. If you're enjoying this podcast, please rate and review it in Apple Podcasts. You can also rate it in Spotify. Mates of State provides our theme song. I'm your host, Blair Hodges, an independent journalist in Salt Lake City, and I'll see you again soon.